Hello. So just now, I just decided that I'm gonna start recording some of my driving reflection thoughts. And so I'm actually headed up to Blavenwood right now, stuck in a little bit of traffic, whatever traffic could be considered in New Hampshire. But today, my reflections as I'm driving, see the winnie girl, wait a winnie girl. So today, one of the random, I guess, sort of topics that I was thinking about was just what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a woman? I often challenge or revisit my beliefs. I think it's very important to constantly do that. Obviously, not every day, but with some regular frequency, just to make sure I'm not getting any tunnel vision. There's new and updated information all the time. So, I really love the idea of strong beliefs held loosely, which was something that statement itself, which was something I was introduced to actually through some courses I took through the Institute for the Future. And I really love the way that's phrased, and I've always kind of applied that concept to my life, where it's good to have your convictions, it's good to have your values and your morals and your ethics, but also have the willingness to let them go when challenged with new information as well. And so I think, there's so many examples of this throughout history, but a few that come to mind is at different points in human history, humans felt very confident and very sure of things like, the earth was flat, the earth was the center of the universe. There was a point where, doctors and surgeons were not scrubbing up before surgery or even washing their hands, even though there was one scientist that was pretty convinced that there were, microorganisms that, were harmful to us and we should be doing this. I mean, people were very adamant, oh my God, they made him seem like he was crazy, all of this. So just a few examples, many, many more. But I think that really sort of exemplifies the need for it's okay to have your convictions, but also be very willing to let go of them when presented with new information. So that's why I do my check-ins with myself. And so one of the things that one of the check-ins I was doing with myself recently is around how can I be more inclusive and supportive of, gender equality, gender expression, especially around the non-binary or gender non-conforming individuals. And so I was just kind of, self-assessing where I still have blind spots and how can I, help shore these up. What are some things that I can do? And so there, one example is I have a Facebook group for Black women in the state of New Hampshire because we make up less than 0.5% of the state's population. And when I formed the group, my intention was to not make it only for women, but also non-binary folk, Black femmes, all of those populations, right, or those people. So I was just kind of in my attempt to do that, one of the ways that I wanted to signal my support of that was, instead of just using the normal, I guess, spelling or widely accepted spelling of women, WOMEN, I used WOMXN. And I know that there's been some debate about that, and I definitely I'm open, obviously, to different viewpoints on that. I'm not married to that spelling or anything like that, but that then just took me down this whole thought of the word woman, WOMEN, and what does it mean to be a woman, WOMAN? M-A-N. And, you know, obviously that word comes from man. It's a man with a womb, right? And so I was like, well, you know, women are so much more than that. And now, you know, just through that word choice alone, we were reduced to the only significant difference between us and a man was the fact that we have a womb. And then that reminded me of some discourse that I've seen around where cis women, you know, I don't think that's a majority. I actually don't know, but where there's some that have gotten upset when there's an attempt to be more inclusive, especially around reproductive rights. You know, it's more than cis women that are impacted by things like making abortion illegal and other reproductive procedures. And I've never felt excluded when there's been attempts to use more inclusive language. So instead of saying things like, you know, women will be impacted by abortion, you know, I've seen other people, you know, they either say women or trans men, or, you know, all genders, you know, things like that. I never was like, oh man, now I feel excluded because they didn't use the term woman. So I've like, that thought process foreign to me, the thought process around like, oh my God, something's being taken away from me by being more inclusive. And so then I started to sort of trace back like, well, how did I come to, you know, feel this way? Because I was actually raised quite religious, and very heteronormative patriarchal standards, man, head of household, man, woman, right? Marriage is between man, woman. The man's the head of the household. The women are subservient. Children are to be seen, not heard. Spare the rod, spoil the child. So it's kind of an anomaly that to me anyways, that I hold this, these such inclusive views, because that was not necessarily instilled in me as when I was young. And I don't, you know, my parents themselves never, like in our household, were like, oh, you know, anything about like trans people or anything like that. I mean, they absolutely upheld the whole man as the head of the household, but, you know, I don't recall any discriminatory talk about whether it be like gay people or trans people or anything like that. So I was trying to trace back, well, you know, how did I come to have this view that a woman is not merely defined by the fact that they have a womb? And I think for me, it's just that, like, you know, when I reflect on myself and think about the attributes that I have, I feel like if I were to describe myself to people who don't know me and not use any gendered terminology or anything like that, I feel that people would assume that I'm male because of those gender stereotypes that exist. So like if you were to, like if I was just to list like out bullet points of some of the things that I've accomplished through my life, and, you know, like how I progressed through my career, you know, owning a home before a certain age, you know, traveling, all of this stuff, and not to use any gender descriptions, I can guarantee that most people would assume that I was a male. And that then led me to, you know, thinking about what I know about the divine energies. So, you know, there's masculine and feminine energies, but they're not like the genders that we have today. It's not like masculine or men and feminine or is women. But it's more about what these energies represent. You know, with feminine energy, it's more concerned about, you know, compassion and thinking and feeling, while the masculine energy is more concerned about doing and achieving. And I obviously relate to both, but for those people who know me personally, I'm a very motivated person. I get motivated by completing things and stuff like that. So, then I started thinking about, why is it important to me to continue to be identified with that term, woman, knowing its origination, knowing it doesn't represent all feminine, more leaning genders. And so that's where I'm at now. Obviously, I'm not making any decisions around changing my gender pronouns or stuff. But again, it's just something, and it's an example of an exercise that I do to really just get myself thinking, so why? So what's the reason? And the answer is, it's just because that's all I've known. That was instilled in me since birth, and stuff. And so I was actually very, happy to have had that. I consider that to be a spiritual experience, where, I'm digging deep, I'm unpacking, taking it up, I'm taking it down. And I found it to be a very rewarding experience. And all of this was just happening, in my mind, having a conversation with myself. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic, do you do this too? Do you have conversations with yourself like this, whether it's verbally out loud or, inside your head? And I hope that this was at least somewhat informative, enjoyable, and I appreciate you listening. Until my next random driving thoughts.